Welcome to a space where curiosity can slow down and feel at ease, where the deep history of our planet unfolds at a rhythm calm enough to accompany you as you rest. Tonight, we are not traveling to the edges of physics or unraveling the puzzles of time itself. Instead, we are turning our attention to something closer, much closer. We are exploring Earth itself, during an era that began after the dinosaurs vanished and continues all the way to the moment you are living in now. This era is known as the Cenozoic. It stretches across more than 66 million years, a vast chapter of recovery, transformation, and quiet reinvention. It is the age when mammals stepped out from obscurity, when forests spread across continents, when oceans shifted their currents and chemistry, and when Earth's climate swung between intense warmth and creeping cold. Hidden within this long story is the gradual emergence of humans, arriving only at the very end, yet shaped by everything that came before. Before we drift deeper into this journey, pause for a moment. Where are you listening from right now? What does the world around you feel like? Perhaps you're wrapped in a blanket at the end of a long day. Maybe you're traveling. Or maybe the sun hasn't yet risen and this is your quiet beginning. Wherever you are, the ground beneath you holds traces of the Cenozoic layers of rock formed by ancient seas. Fossils of animals that once walked where you now stand. This age still surrounds you, in the air you breathe and the land that supports you. And if you find this gentle wandering through deep time calming or meaningful, consider liking the video or subscribing. It helps this small corner of quiet science reach others who may be searching for the same sense of calm. Now, let us begin. The Cenozoic opens not with chaos, but with stillness. Not silence exactly, life never truly goes silent, but a quiet that follows catastrophe. Around 66 million years ago, a massive asteroid struck Earth near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. In an instant, the age of dinosaurs came to an end. Creatures that had dominated land, sea, and sky for over 100 million years vanished, along with countless other forms of life. What followed was not a simple reset, but an opening. The survivors, mostly small, adaptable creatures, found themselves in a world suddenly free of giants. This new chapter became known as the Age of Mammals, though it is equally the age of birds, flowering plants, and relentless change. It is tempting to imagine Earth's history as a straight path, as though once dinosaurs disappeared, mammals simply rose and marched steadily toward modern life. Reality was far messier. Climates fluctuated, oceans advanced and retreated, continents drifted, collided, and reshaped the planet. Ecosystems formed, collapsed, and reformed again. The Cenozoic was not a victory parade, it was a long experiment in survival. In the immediate aftermath of the impact, the sky was choked with dust and ash, sunlight dimmed, plants struggled, and so did the animals that relied on them. But slowly, the atmosphere cleared. Life began to move forward again. Small mammals, creatures resembling shrews, early primates, and possum-like forms scurried through dense vegetation. Birds, descendants of feathered dinosaurs, flourished. Crocodiles, turtles, and other resilient reptiles endured much as they always had. The world felt familiar, yet strangely open. Vast ecological spaces stood empty, waiting to be filled. During the earliest phase of the Cenozoic, known as the Paleocene, Earth was warm and humid. Tropical forests spread far beyond their modern boundaries, reaching into regions that today are icy and barren. Imagine palm trees growing in places like Alaska or Greenland. In this warmth, life diversified rapidly. Mammals experimented with new shapes and lifestyles. Some grew larger, taking on roles once filled by dinosaurs. Others became highly specialized, adapting to specific diets or environments. Early primates appeared, equipped with grasping hands and forward-facing eyes, small traits that would later shape an extraordinary lineage. In the oceans, sharks continued their reign, while bony fish diversified. Early whales, still capable of walking on land, began their gradual transition into fully aquatic giants. Standing on a Paleocene shoreline, the scene would appear both familiar and alien. Waves rolled in, birds circled overhead, but the plants, insects, and animals were subtly different. Hoofed mammals resembled horses, but not quite. Every direction revealed a planet rebuilding itself. Change came swiftly. In geological terms, just a moment after the extinction, mammals diversified dramatically. Grazers evolved. Predators sharpened their tools. Rodents spread with ever-growing teeth. Bats took to the night skies using sound to navigate. Primates continued their quiet experimentation among the trees. Around 55 million years ago, Earth entered one of its warmest episodes, the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. Global temperatures surged, forests stretched nearly to the poles. Crocodiles swam in Arctic waters. Ice caps vanished entirely. This warmth drove rapid evolution and global migration, reshaping life across the planet. But Earth never remains fixed over millions of years. Climates cooled, grasslands expanded, new forms of life adapted to open plains and long chases. Continents continued their slow-motion dance. India collided with Asia, raising the Himalayas and altering global climate. South America and Australia remained isolated, evolving unique animals unlike anywhere else on Earth. Throughout it all, the Cenozoic unfolded as a story of flexibility. Species survived not by dominance, but by adaptation. Horses began as fox-sized forest browsers. Elephants had strange, multi-tusked ancestors. Whales still carried hints of their land-dwelling past. Even early humans were just one branch among many experiments in intelligence and behavior. None of these creatures knew what was coming. Each lived fully in its present, unaware of future transformations. From their perspective, their world was complete just as ours feels now. The Cenozoic is, at its heart, a long exhale after disaster, a planet healing itself, life testing new possibilities. From dense forests and shifting seas to the eventual arrival of humans, this age shaped the Earth we recognize today. Long before modern rodents ever appeared, there existed small mammals that quietly filled similar roles. They were tiny, adaptable, and remarkably tough. For tens of millions of years, these creatures thrived, spreading across landscapes and becoming some of the most common mammals of their time. Today, they are largely forgotten, not because they failed, but because they left no direct descendants. Yet during their age, they were everywhere successful survivors in a changing world. The predators of the early Cenozoic were nothing like the cats and dogs we know today. Instead, the dominant hunters were creodonts. These carnivorous mammals, now completely extinct, resembled wolves or hyenas at a glance. But they belonged to a separate evolutionary branch altogether. Some were small and agile, chasing insects and small prey through the undergrowth. Others grew much larger, stalking herbivores in dense forests. For much of the Paleocene and Eocene, creodonts ruled as the top land predators. Their eventual disappearance, replaced by the ancestors of modern carnivores, reveals just how experimental and flexible mammalian evolution truly was. Among the most intriguing survivors of this era were the early primates. During the Paleocene and early Eocene, they were tiny, tree-dwelling animals, no bigger than squirrels, with grasping hands and feet, keen eyesight, and bodies suited for life in the canopy. They moved easily among branches. From these modest beginnings would eventually come monkeys, apes, and humans, but for millions of years, they were simply one small group among many, clinging to survival in forested environments. If you had seen them then, nothing about them would have hinted at their future importance. They were just survivors, adapting quietly to a world of trees. While land mammals diversified, the oceans were undergoing transformations of their own. The great marine reptiles mosasaurs and plesiosaurs had vanished in the extinction. Into this empty space stepped mammals, the ancestors of whales, known as archaeocetes. Began as four-legged animals that lived on land but ventured into rivers and coastal waters. Gradually, they spent more time in the sea. Their bodies stretched, limbs shortened, and nostrils slowly shifted upward. By the Eocene, whales had become fully marine, powerful swimmers hunting fish and squid. Some reached immense sizes, marking the first time mammalian giants ruled the oceans. At the same time, bats were exploring an entirely different frontier. They appear suddenly in the fossil record of the early Eocene, already capable of flight and echolocation. Their wings formed from elongated fingers allowed them to hunt insects at night, opening access to a world few mammals could exploit. In forest-dominated landscapes, this ability proved incredibly successful. Even today, bats remain one of the most widespread mammal groups, tracing their origins back to this wave of post-extinction experimentation. Growth during the Cenozoic was not uniform. Some lineages found success in becoming larger. Big herbivores could reach higher vegetation, intimidate predators, and travel farther. Large predators could bring down bigger prey, but size came with costs, greater food demands, slower reproduction, and vulnerability to sudden climate change. Many giants flourished for millions of years only to disappear. Others reversed course, shrinking again as conditions shifted. One especially strange group, the Dinosaurs, lived during the Eocene. These massive herbivores had bulky bodies and bizarre skulls adorned with bony knobs and protrusions. Some even possessed saber-like canine teeth, an odd feature for plant eaters. They looked like an improbable blend of rhino, elephant, and hippo, yet belonged to none of those groups. For a brief window of time, they were among the largest mammals on Earth, before vanishing completely. They were evolutionary experiments successful, but temporary. Geography played a powerful role in shaping survival. South America, isolated for much of the Cenozoic, became home to some of the strangest animals ever to live. Without competition from northern predators, massive flightless birds, often called terror birds, rose to the top of the food chain. Some stood taller than humans, wielding crushing beaks. Alongside them lived giant ground sloths as large as elephants, armored glyptodonts with car-sized shells, and enormous rodents heavier than people. Isolation turned the continent into a laboratory of extremes. Australia followed a similar but distinct path. Cut off from other landmasses, it became dominated by marsupials. Some evolved into giant kangaroo-like herbivores, others became fierce predators, such as Thylacoleo, the marsupial lion, with slicing teeth and powerful forelimbs. For tens of millions of years, Australian mammals evolved largely apart from placental mammals, giving rise to wildlife found nowhere else on Earth. As the Cenozoic continued, extremes of size became more pronounced. Horses began in the Eocene as fox-sized forest animals, later evolving into powerful grazers. Elephants emerged from small, pig-like ancestors before becoming towering tusked giants. Rhinos followed a similar path, with some extinct species growing taller than modern giraffes. The largest land mammal ever known, Parastrotherium, lived millions of years ago and may have stood nearly 6 meters tall at the shoulder, weighing over 20 tons. Yet size alone did not determine success. Many of the most enduring mammals remained small. Rodents spread across the globe, their ever-growing teeth allowing them to exploit countless food sources. Bats and small primates thrived on insects. Shrews and moles flourished underground. These animals succeeded not by becoming enormous, but by reproducing quickly and adapting easily. The variety of sizes reflected changing environments. Early in the Cenozoic, warm, dense forests favored small, agile mammals. As climates cooled and grasslands spread, larger grazers evolved to roam open plains, followed by predators built for pursuit. Climate and vegetation continually reshaped who grew, who shrank, and who vanished. When we look back, it's easy to focus on the giants because they capture our imagination, but survival depended just as much on the small and hidden. Without them, ecosystems would collapse, and no lineage including our own would have endured. From the tiniest bats to whales larger than any dinosaur, mammals stretched themselves across every possible size. This diversity marks a group that didn't just survive catastrophe, but reinvented itself again and again. Even as the ancient creodonts lingered in a few regions, their dominance was fading. A new generation of hunters was rising, early members of the modern carnivores. The ancestors of cats, dogs, and hyenas began to reshape predation itself. These animals were built for speed and endurance, perfectly suited to life in open terrain. Some evolved cooperative behaviors, especially among dog-like carnivores, where hunting in packs made it possible to overwhelm large grazers on the plains. Others, like early cats, refined a different strategy: patience, stealth, and explosive bursts of power at the final moment. The spread of grasslands transformed the land into arenas of pursuit. Predator and prey became locked in an evolutionary race, each adaptation answered by another. As grasses expanded, entire continents changed character. In North America, open plains filled with herds of early horses, camels, and antelope-like animals. Africa saw the rise of grazing mammals alongside the ancestors of elephants and giraffes. Across Eurasia, vast steppes supported rhinos, gazelles, and the early relatives of bison. South America, still isolated for much of the Cenozoic, followed its own path, producing unusual grazers such as giant rodents and sloth-like animals. Wherever grasses spread, complex ecosystems followed grazers, predators, scavengers, and countless smaller organisms woven together into open land food webs. Grasses succeeded not merely because they were tough, but because of how they grew. Unlike many plants, grasses regenerate from their base. When eaten down, they survived and returned stronger. Heavy grazing did not destroy them, it encouraged them. This created a powerful feedback loop. Herds maintained open landscapes by feeding and trampling, while grasses continuously nourished those herds. Beneath the surface, deep root systems stabilized soils and locked carbon underground, subtly altering atmospheric chemistry. Over millions of years, grasslands became part of Earth's climate machinery, helping drive cooler and drier global conditions that favored their continued expansion visually. These new landscapes were striking. Dense forests gave way to rolling seas of grass under open skies. Seasonal migrations traced invisible paths across the plains as herds followed rain and fresh growth. Predators watched from ridges or slipped silently through tall grasses. Birds filled the air, some scavenging, others feeding on insects stirred up by passing animals. Insects thrived as well, creating a constant hum that defined the grassland soundscape. Life in these environments demanded new behaviors. Herding became common, offering safety in numbers. Long-distance migration emerged as animals tracked shifting resources. Social complexity increased as group living required coordination and communication. Predators responded in kind, some forming packs, others specializing in ambush techniques suited to open terrain. Grasslands rewarded vigilance, speed, and adaptability. By around 20 million years ago, grasslands had become one of the dominant ecosystems on Earth. This was a golden age for grazers. Horses diversified into multiple forms, from small forest dwellers to tall runners of the plains. Antelope and bovid ancestors spread across Africa and Eurasia. Camels flourished in North America before later dispersing into Asia. Rhinoceroses evolved into astonishing shapes and sizes, including species that stood taller than modern giraffes. South America remained a world apart. Its plains were inhabited by strange-hoofed mammals unrelated to horses or antelope, yet filling similar ecological roles. Giant rodents and unique grazers dominated the landscape, while terror birds towering, flightless predators ruled as apex hunters. These grasslands mirrored those of other continents in structure, but not in caste. Only later, when the Isthmus of Panama rose and linked the Americas, did northern grazers and predators pour southward, reshaping these ecosystems forever. The importance of grasslands extended far beyond their own boundaries. Traits refined their speed, endurance, grazing teeth, and social cooperation became defining features of many modern mammals. Even today, iconic animals like horses, bison, antelope, elephants, and zebras carry the legacy of this transformation. The spread of grasslands also quietly set the stage for humanity. As forests retreated and open landscapes expanded, some primate lineages began adapting to life beyond the trees. Upright walking may have been favored where trees were scattered, rather than continuous. In this way, the story of grasses is woven into our own distant origins. Looking back, the shift from a forest-dominated world to one shared with grasslands was among the greatest changes of the Cenozoic. Forests had been layered and shadowed. Grasslands were open, loud, and dynamic, filled with movement, migration, and visible danger. Mammals adapted brilliantly to this new stage. All of this unfolded on a planet that was itself in motion. During the Cenozoic, continents drifted, collided, and reshaped the surface of the Earth. India crashed into Asia, raising the Himalayas and the vast Tibetan Plateau. These mountains altered wind patterns, strengthened monsoons, and accelerated rock weathering that pulled carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, contributing to long-term cooling. Africa drifted northward, closing ancient seaways and helping form the Alps and other European ranges. Australia broke free from Antarctica, allowing ocean currents to isolate the southern continent and plunge it into ice. South America remained isolated for tens of millions of years, evolving a unique fauna until the rise of the Panamanian land bridge triggered one of the greatest biological exchanges in history. North America itself was reshaped by mountain building and volcanism, influencing rainfall patterns and driving the spread of grasslands and rainshadow regions. Ocean currents shifted as continents moved. The closure of seaways redirected heat around the globe. When the Isthmus of Panama finally closed, it strengthened the Gulf Stream, sending warm water north and helping trigger ice ages. Volcanic activity added another layer, sometimes warming the planet, sometimes cooling it, always reminding life that the ground beneath was never truly stable. By the later Cenozoic, Earth had shifted from a warm greenhouse world to a cooler icehouse state. Antarctica froze, ice sheets expanded, sea levels fell, grasslands spread further, forests retreated, and animals adapted once again. Mammoths, woolly rhinos, and other cold-adapted giants appeared, while early human ancestors began navigating landscapes that were no longer endless forest, but shifting mosaics of grassland, woodland, and dry zones. The Cenozoic was not just the age of mammals. It was the age of motion, of drifting continents, rising mountains, changing climates, and life constantly reshaping itself in response. Every herd that crossed the plains, every predator that gave chase, did so on a stage built by deep geological forces. The grasslands, the mountains, the ice, and the animals were all part of one unfolding story, a planet reinventing itself, step by step, across deep time. Earth's climate never moved in a straight line. Temperatures rose and fell, sometimes gently, sometimes with sudden force, as powerful feedback systems pushed the planet toward warmth and then pulled it back toward cold. Ice sheets advanced across continents, then slowly retreated, only to return again later. Rain belts shifted, deserts expanded and contracted, and coastlines crept inland before falling back toward the sea. For the animals living through these ages, the ground beneath them was never truly stable. Survival meant movement, following food, adapting to unfamiliar habitats, or disappearing when change came too fast. What makes this immense story remarkable is how deeply connected its parts were. Mountains rose, exposing fresh rock to wind and rain. That rock weathered, drawing carbon dioxide from the air. Rivers carried that carbon to the oceans. The atmosphere thinned, the planet cooled, and ice began to spread. As ice expanded, it reshaped ocean currents, which in turn altered global climate even further. This was not a simple cooling caused by dimmer sunlight or colder air alone. It was a planetary system, a vast machine in which every component pushed against the next. The Himalayas fed rivers. The rivers altered the atmosphere. The atmosphere cooled the earth. Ice reshaped the seas. And every living thing, from grazing horses to early human ancestors, felt the pull of that interconnected cycle. If you could stand in the Miocene and slowly look across the land, you would see grasslands stretching toward the horizon. Herds moved steadily across open plains, watched by predators that had evolved new hunting strategies suited to wide, exposed spaces. In Africa, forests had broken into patches, and the earliest hominins may have been testing life on the ground as much as in the trees. Farther south, Antarctica was already locked in ice, its glaciers grinding rock into dust, carving icebergs and chilling the surrounding oceans. The planet still held warmth and motion, but the direction of change was unmistakable. The greenhouse world of the early Cenozoic was fading, and icehouse Earth was emerging. The age of ice had begun to approach, yet these winds of change carried more than cold. They opened new habitats, redirected evolution, and prepared the stage for the dramatic ice ages of the Pleistocene. They remind us that climate is never fixed, that Earth shifts between modes over deep time, and that life must continually adjust to forces that are often invisible but relentless. As cooling continued, and the first great ice sheets became possible, forests retreated in many regions, replaced by expanding grasslands. The animals that walked those landscapes began to look increasingly familiar. The Cenozoic had started with creatures that seemed experimental, mammals with strange teeth, odd horns or awkward proportions, and birds that looked more monstrous than modern. But as millions of years passed and ecosystems stabilized, a clearer pattern emerged, one closer to the world we recognize. It was during the Miocene and Pliocene that the first true glimpses of modern animal forms appeared. You could walk into those landscapes and still find strangeness, but you would also recognize elephants, horses, cats, antelope, and apes. Horses provide one of the clearest examples of this transformation. In the early Eocene, their ancestors were tiny forest animals, no larger than small dogs, with multiple toes suited to soft ground. They browsed leaves and moved quietly through dense undergrowth. As forests gave way to grasslands, horses changed. Their teeth became taller and stronger, able to withstand the abrasive silica of grasses. Their legs lengthened, their toes reduced, until a single hoof carried their weight. By the Miocene, horses were sleek runners built for speed across open plains. Though they existed in many forms, their overall shape became unmistakable. A Miocene herd crossing grassland would be instantly recognizable, even if the proportions felt slightly unfamiliar. Elephants followed a similar path. Their earliest ancestors resembled hippos more than giants, with small tusks and semi-aquatic habits. Over time, their lineages diversified and grew. By the Miocene, proboscideans had become massive animals with longer tusks and more pronounced trunks. Some species carried straight tusks, others curved or spiraled, and their teeth evolved into enormous grinding surfaces capable of processing tough vegetation. While not yet identical to modern elephants, their identity was clear. Predators were changing too. Earlier carnivores like creodonts and nimravids faded, replaced by true cats. Early felids appeared during the Miocene, smaller than modern lions, but unmistakably feline, with retractable claws, keen senses, and powerful bodies. Alongside them, saber-toothed cats developed their iconic elongated canines, creating predators that dominated ecosystems for millions of years. Though often imagined as creatures of a lost world, their stalking behavior would look familiar to anyone who has watched a modern big cat hunt. Dogs were spreading as well, originating in North America. Early canids evolved into wolf-like, fox-like, and jackal-like forms. Long legs and endurance made them effective pursuit hunters, and by the Pliocene, early wolves were hunting cooperatively in packs. The predator community was beginning to resemble the one we know today, shaped by speed, stamina, and cooperation. Smaller mammals followed the same trend toward familiarity. Rodents, already successful since the Paleocene, diversified further into forms resembling modern squirrels, mice, and beavers. Rabbits appeared, fast-breeding and agile. Bats continued to thrive, their fossils nearly indistinguishable from living species. Shrews and moles carried forward body plans so effective they required little change. Some designs, once perfected, endured. Bird life also took on modern form. Songbirds spread widely, filling forests and grasslands with sound. Waterfowl adapted to lakes, rivers, and coastlines. Raptors refined hunting strategies seen today in hawks, eagles, and owls. Though some giant birds still stalked the land, the skies increasingly resembled those above us now. Primates formed perhaps the strongest bridge between past and present. During the Miocene, monkeys and apes spread across Africa, Europe, and Asia. Monkeys split into Old World and New World forms, each with distinct traits. Apes diversified into many species, some tree-dwelling, others ground-oriented. Fossils reveal a rich variety, many now extinct, but within them lay the foundations of modern apes and humans. Seeing a Miocene ape would feel uncanny, both familiar and foreign. The oceans mirrored this transition. By the Miocene, whales were fully aquatic and diversified into baleen and toothed forms. Baleen whales grew enormous, filtering plankton much like modern blue whales. Dolphins appeared, intelligent and agile. Seals, sea lions, and walruses became established, adapted for life between land and sea. Manatees and dugongs grazed shallow seagrass beds. Even sharks thrived, and among them arose one of the most legendary predators of all, Megalodon, reaching lengths over 50 feet, with teeth the size of a human hand. It preyed on whales and dominated the seas for millions of years. This era stands out because of its mixture of the familiar and the strange. A Miocene savanna might show herds grazing much like those in modern Africa, with predators stalking in recognizable ways. But alongside them lived animals unlike anything alive today. Elephants with spiraled tusks, rhinos taller than giraffes, giant pig-like beasts, and apes that looked almost, but not quite, human. It was a world half-formed, a rehearsal for the modern one. Behavior evolved alongside appearance. Herding, migration, complex social structures, cooperative hunting, and territorial defense became more pronounced. These behaviors emerged in response to open landscapes and seasonal climates. Watching these animals would feel like witnessing the early versions of dramas that still unfold today. By the Pliocene, the line between ancient and modern had grown thin. True horses galloped across plains, elephants roamed Africa, big cats hunted with stealth, wolves chased prey in packs, birds filled the air, even hominins had appeared, walking upright on the African landscape. The present was beginning to take shape. The Cenozoic story continues into the Ice Ages, beginning just over 2 million years ago. These were not single events, but rhythmic cycles of cold and warmth. Ice advanced, then retreated, shaping valleys, carving lakes, and forcing life to adapt again and again. These cycles influenced not only animals, but the rise of humanity itself. The Ice Ages remind us that Earth's climate is never static. The world we know exists in a brief pause between glacial extremes. The landscapes we inhabit, the fertile soils, river valleys, and coastlines are gifts shaped by ice. And the animals we recognize today are the result of countless experiments, refined by deep time. The Cenozoic was an age of change, motion, and connection. From shifting continents to evolving life, every part moved together. It was the era that transformed Earth into a world that feels familiar and set the stage for U.S. Frozen remains uncovered in Siberia, bodies with skin, hair, and muscle still preserved offer an eerie window into a vanished age. It is as though the ice itself refused to release them, holding on to a moment of deep time. These discoveries make the Ice Age feel less distant, less abstract, and disturbingly real. Mammoths were not alone in their world. Their close relatives, mastodons, shared the land but lived very different lives. Mammoths thrived in open grasslands, while mastodons preferred dense forests, feeding on leaves, branches, and conifers. Their teeth reflected this difference, designed for crushing rather than grinding, and their builds were shorter, heavier, and immensely strong. Mastodons spread across much of North America, filling an ecological role distinct from mammoths, yet just as essential. To encounter one in a shadowed forest would have felt both familiar and strange, a reminder that the elephant family once spanned nearly the entire planet. Rhinoceroses, too, reached extraordinary forms across Eurasia. Woolly rhinos grazed the frozen steppes, their thick coats and heavy skin shielding them from brutal cold. Long before the height of the ice ages, giants like Paraschotherium roamed Asia, the largest land mammal ever known. It stood more than 15 feet tall at the shoulder and stretched nearly 40 feet in length. It fed from treetops, reshaping forests simply by existing within them. Though separated from mammoths by millions of years, it belongs in the story of megafauna as proof of how far mammalian size could be pushed. South America, isolated for much of the Cenozoic, developed its own astonishing giants. Ground sloths, some rising over 20 feet tall, moved slowly across plains and forests, rearing up to pull down branches with massive claws. Glyptodons, distant relatives of armadillos, evolved into tank-like animals the size of small cars, protected by domed armor. Terror birds, long after their peak, still stalked the land with hooked beaks built for killing. When a land bridge finally connected South and North America, many of these creatures moved north, joining an already crowded world of giants. Australia's long isolation produced an entirely different cast of megafauna. There, marsupials filled roles held elsewhere by placental mammals. Diprotodons, giant relatives of wombats, grew larger than modern rhinos. Kangaroos reached heights over 10 feet. Thylacoleo, the marsupial lion, was smaller than mammoths, but a fearsome predator with crushing jaws and slicing teeth. Giant birds wandered the continent, and although large reptiles still survived in some regions, Australia's megafauna formed a world apart, shaped by climate and separation, yet following the same late Cenozoic trend toward immense size. Predators rose to match their prey. Saber-toothed cats hunted with ambush tactics, their long curved canines built for taking down massive herbivores. Dire wolves, heavier and stronger than modern wolves, hunted cooperatively across the Americas. Cave bears dominated European landscapes with sheer size and power. Lions, leopards, jaguars, and hyenas expanded their ranges, refining strategies that demanded strength, endurance, and coordination. The Ice Age was not gentle. It was a world defined by size, danger, and constant adaptation. What stands out is not only how large these animals were, but how widespread gigantism became. Every continent hosted its own giants, often multiple lineages reaching extreme sizes at the same time. This was not an anomaly limited to a few species, it was a global pattern. Scientists still debate why. Climate, food availability, predator-prey relationships, and chance all played parts. Whatever the cause, the result was a world unlike today's, populated by creatures that feel more mythical than historical. These giants shaped the land around them. Mammoth and bison herds trampled vegetation, maintaining open grasslands. Ground sloths altered forests by breaking branches and reshaping trees. Glyptodons disturbed soils. Predators removed the weak and influenced the behavior of prey. Ice Age megafauna were not passive inhabitants, they were engineers of entire ecosystems, transforming landscapes in ways we are only beginning to understand. For early humans, these animals were both threat and lifeline. Across Africa, Eurasia, and the Americas, people encountered giants that could kill them or feed them for weeks. Cave paintings show mammoths, bison, and rhinos etched into stone, proof of their importance in human imagination. Cut marks on bones reveal that humans hunted them, sometimes driving herds into traps. Meat, hides, and bones became food, shelter, clothing, and tools. For thousands of years, humans and megafauna shared the world. Then, within the last 10,000 to 15,000 years, most of these giants vanished. The reasons remain contested. As the last ice age ended, climates shifted. Cold steppes shrank while forests and wetlands expanded. Human hunting added pressure, especially in regions where animals had never encountered people and lacked fear of them. Disease, habitat disruption, and overlapping stresses may all have played roles. Whatever the cause, the outcome was unmistakable. Mammoths disappeared. Mastodons vanished. Giant sloths fell. Glyptodons, diprotodons, saber-toothed cats, and dire wolves followed. What remains today are echoes. Elephants are the last great proboscideans, carrying traces of mammoths and mastodons. Modern rhinos survive in reduced numbers. Bison, moose, and elk hint at the scale of ancient herds. Lions and tigers still reign as apex predators, but they are smaller than the saber-tooths and cave lions that came before. Even these survivors remind us how rich and extravagant the Ice Age world once was. To stand on an Ice Age plain would have been overwhelming. Mammoth herds stretching to the horizon, predators circling, birds wheeling overhead, sloths towering above you even while crouched. It was a world that defied proportion, where survival meant living alongside immense forces of flesh and bone. Today, it feels almost impossible that such creatures were real, yet their bones, tusks, and frozen bodies insist they were. Megafauna were not accidents or curiosities. They were natural responses to the environments of the late Cenozoic, perfectly suited to their time, perhaps too large for our modern world, but not for theirs. Their absence leaves a silence that still lingers for tens of millions of years. The rhythms of climate, drifting continents, rising mountains, and evolution shaped life's course. Forests expanded and retreated. Grasslands spread, ice sheets advanced and melted. Species rose and fell. Life adapted again and again. Then, in the final sliver of this vast timeline, a new force appeared: humans. Early hominins had already begun walking upright, freeing their hands and expanding their brains. By around 2 million years ago, Homo erectus emerged: toolmakers, fire users, and travelers, built for endurance, capable of planning and cooperation. This spread far beyond Africa. Unlike most animals, humans could adapt to many environments, crafting tools, sharing knowledge, and surviving where others could not. As ice ages came and went, humans adapted, repeatedly developing clothing, shelters, and strategies for cold and warmth alike. Hunting large animals became deliberate and coordinated. Over time, human pressure on megafauna grew steady and relentless. By about 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens appeared, bringing symbolic thought, language, and imagination. Culture became the engine of adaptation, allowing knowledge to accumulate across generations. Humans could now change faster than biology alone ever could. In Africa, where large animals had evolved alongside humans, balance held longer. Elsewhere, the impact was swift. In Australia, megafauna vanished soon after human arrival. In the Americas, within a few thousand years of people arriving, mammoths, mastodons, giant sloths, and saber-toothed cats were gone. Humans reshaped landscapes with fire, domesticated plants and animals, built shelters, and created art. Unlike any force before them, they acted with foresight and intention. Over time, their influence rivaled climate and geology themselves. The late Cenozoic marked a turning point. What had once been the age of mammals was becoming the age of humans, and the speed of this transformation was unprecedented. Within a single lifetime, knowledge could reshape survival. Within generations, entire ecosystems could change. If you stood in Africa 100,000 years ago, you would see herds, predators, and small groups of humans with tools and fire, fragile in appearance, yet destined to reshape the planet. In Europe, 30,000 years ago, humans painted mammoths on cave walls. In the Americas 15,000 years ago, people entered lands that would never be the same again. The giants were real, and their disappearance marks one of the most profound shifts in Earth's story. The arrival of humans in the Cenozoic was not simply another species adjusting to colder climates or shifting landscapes. It marked the emergence of something entirely new, a force capable of reflection, imagination, and deliberate action. One lineage of primates, shaped over millions of years by forests, grasslands, and changing climates, stepped into a role no creature had ever filled before. Humans did not just respond to the world around them, they began to redirect it. By the time humans appeared, the Cenozoic had already witnessed profound transformations. Forests had expanded and retreated. Grasslands had spread across continents. Ice sheets had advanced and melted. Megafauna had risen to dominance, yet with humans, both the speed and scale of change shifted. Their arrival opened a new chapter in Earth's story, one that carried echoes of the past, but pointed toward an entirely different future, a world where thought itself became a geological force. In the immense timeline of the Cenozoic, 10,000 years is almost nothing, a blink, a final breath at the end of an era spanning more than 66 million years. And yet within that brief moment, Earth changed in ways comparable to its greatest upheavals. The glaciers that had pulsed back and forth for hundreds of thousands of years began a final retreat, carving valleys, filling basins with water, and reshaping continents. The great megafauna faded into memory, and humans, latecomers to the story, began leaving marks that went far beyond hunting or fire. They reshaped land intentionally, permanently. This most recent chapter, the Holocene, is often described as a short pause of warmth between ice ages. For humanity, it has been everything. When the last ice age ended around 12,000 years ago, the planet warmed rapidly. Ice sheets pulled northward, revealing landscapes hidden beneath ice for tens of millennia. Scandinavia slowly lifted as the weight of glaciers disappeared. In North America, melting ice carved out the basins that would become the Great Lakes. Rivers surged with meltwater, seas rose, coastlines shifted, and land bridges vanished beneath the waves. What once seemed permanent during the Ice Age dissolved in a few thousand years. Animals adapted as best they could. Bison moved north, caribou followed shrinking tundra, elephants remained only in Africa and parts of Asia. Their ranges greatly reduced. Some cold-adapted species survived only in the harshest regions, while others became isolated remnants of once vast populations. Humans had already contributed to the decline of many giants, and the warming world added new pressures. In many regions, megafauna disappeared entirely, leaving humans in a world where the largest animals were increasingly those under human control. For people, the end of the Ice Age was not an ending, it was an opening. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans had lived as hunters and gatherers, moving with seasons and herds through unstable climates. As temperatures stabilized, new possibilities emerged. Plants were cultivated first in small plots, then in organized fields. Wheat, barley, rice, maize, and countless other crops became the foundation of survival. Animals were domesticated, not just hunted. Sheep, goats, cattle, and horses entered human life as partners. Agriculture transformed everything. Mobility gave way to settlement. Camps became villages. Villages grew into towns, then cities. Food surpluses allowed populations to grow, labor to specialize, and cultures to flourish. Within a few thousand years, civilizations rose along great rivers: the Nile, the Tigris and Euphrates, the Indus, the Yellow River. Writing, trade, art, and architecture followed. All of it depended on the relative stability of the Holocene climate, where seasons followed predictable rhythms. This stability did not mean uniformity. Droughts, floods, and regional climate shifts still occurred. But compared to the dramatic swings of the Ice Ages, the Holocene was calm. That calm gave humans time to build, and ecosystems time to reorganize. Forests reclaimed lands once buried under ice. Grasslands expanded, especially in Africa, forming the savannas that still support wildlife today. Wetlands and river valleys became centers of life. The landscapes that emerged were shaped by both natural forces and human hands. As human societies grew, their influence deepened. Forests were cleared, rivers redirected, species moved far beyond their native ranges. Fire was used not only for survival, but for land management. In a geological instant, humans became a planetary force, altering soil, water, and atmosphere in ways that would persist long after individual lives ended. This was no longer a story of humans adapting to Earth, it was Earth responding to humans. The Holocene was also an age of movement and connection. Rising seas submerged the land bridge of Beringia, isolating continents. Islands took on their modern forms. Humans crossed oceans, settled distant islands, and spread across every major landmass. With them traveled crops, animals, technologies, and ideas. Cultures blended, collided, and transformed. Subtle climate shifts influenced success and collapse alike. Periods of reliable rainfall supported flourishing civilizations. Prolonged droughts led to migration and decline. Even in a relatively stable climate, humans learned that they were never beyond nature's reach. Throughout it all, Earth continued its slow rhythms. Mountains rose imperceptibly. Continents drifted. Volcanoes erupted, sometimes altering global climates. The planet's deep pulse never stopped. even as humans layered their own rapid rhythm on top of it. In the grand scale of the Cenozoic, the Holocene is brief, a single breath of warmth, yet within that breath lies all of recorded history. Some now argue that this human influence marks the beginning of a new epoch, the Anthropocene. Whether officially defined or not, the idea is clear. In a short span of time, humans have altered the planet as profoundly as glaciers or volcanoes once did. From mass extinctions to altered rivers to atmospheric change, the imprint is unmistakable. Its roots lie in the Holocene, when humans shifted from participants in ecosystems to their engineers. Looking back across the Cenozoic, this final chapter feels impossibly short, yet it contains the entire arc of civilization, the rise of farming, cities, science, and technology compressed into a thin layer of time, a moment carrying the weight of forests, ice, and megafauna that came before it. To walk through the early Holocene would have felt strangely quiet. Forests spread, rivers flowed, herds still grazed, but the giants were gone, their absence leaving a silence. Humans began building villages, tending crops, lighting fires not by accident, but by design. The world settled into its modern form with humanity at its center. The Cenozoic, however, is not over. Ice may return, climates will shift. Again, what makes this chapter unique is not its permanence, but its intimacy. It is the chapter that holds us most directly, a brief alignment between planet and species that produced the world we know. When we look deeper into the Cenozoic, time stretches beyond comprehension. 66 million years ago, catastrophe erased the dinosaurs. The planet was left quiet, wounded, and open. From that silence, mammals rose, small at first, tentative, then diverse and bold. Birds filled the skies, forests returned, oceans teemed with life. The Cenozoic became an age of recovery and experimentation. It unfolded in waves. Early mammals explored new roles. Extreme warmth once allowed crocodiles near the poles and whales that still walked on land. Cooling scattered forests and expanded grasslands. Apes diversified. Horses spread across continents. Ice ages sculpted landscapes and produced giants. And finally, humans emerged, shaping the world in ways no species had before. Mountains rose during this era: the Himalayas, Andes, Rockies, Alps, reshaping climate and evolution. Oceans shifted their currents. Ice carved valleys and fjords. Sea levels rose and fell. Life responded again and again, adapting or disappearing. The Cenozoic reminds us that Earth is never still. Its creatures familiar and alien are chapters in a single unfolding story. From tiny early mammals to towering megafauna, from saber-toothed predators to humans striking stone and kindling fire, we are still living inside this story. The forests, whales, birds, and even ourselves are Cenozoic beings, products of deep time. The difference now is that we are also shaping what comes next. Climate, geology, and chance once guided change. Now humans stand alongside them. The lesson of the Cenozoic is both gift and responsibility. Life endures, but nothing lasts unchanged. The giants that vanished remind us how fragile even the strongest can be. The future will judge our chapter not by how powerful we were, but by how wisely we shaped the age we inherited.